Not guilty, not guilty, 10
Charles
times.
Manson, described today by the star witness
Jury
again.
in the so-called Night Stalker case reached its verdict today.
Orenthal James Simpson not guilty of the crime of
The woman
murder.
suspected of shooting Selena is still holding police at
Music
bay.
producer Phil Spector was convicted Monday.
In Los Angeles, a killer the police are calling the Hillside Strangler.
Do you find that Mr. Depp has proven all the elements of defamation? Answer, yes.
Welcome back to LA Legal, where we talk about the biggest, baddest, and juiciest Hollywood scandals. I'm Liana. I am joined by Nima Rahmani, who I think is now our season regular. And he brought two of his friends today. So please introduce them. This is actually the first time we have guests on our podcast. So I told you season 2 was going to be great. So take it away.
I'm honored to have my good friend Sam Manuchehri here. Also, will be joining us his partner Sam Tabibian. Sam and Sam, good friends of mine. They're with Life Law. They're going to drop some knowledge about USC. Fun fact, more than half of the cheaters got into USC. So we'll be talking about USC because he is the official law firm of USC Athletics. But he did go to UCLA with me, so we'll talk about UCLA. We'll talk about the Ivies. You know I love to talk about that. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you guys
Hence
for
the
having
hat.
us.
I just saw it. Very
proud.
cool.
So happy to be the first guest on your show for season 2. It's very exciting. Yes, I am a UCLA undergrad, USC law graduate, but I'm a Trojan through and through.
All right, we'll be talking
Sounds
about
like there's
USC.
going to be a lot of banter on this
yes.
segment. So if you guys haven't picked up, obviously we'll be talking about the college admission scandal, better known as the College Blue Operation
Varsity
Blues. There we go. So let's take it away with the intro, and then I want to hear your thoughts this time. Nima, take a back seat for a second.
Absolutely.
So in 2019, what may have been known as the biggest white-collar scandal of the century finally came to light. Investigators swept through the nation, taking down the wealthiest of families, university staff, and sports coaches, resigning that very day. The media became crazy when everyone's favorite Full House actress, Lori Loughlin, was one of the 33 parents arrested and charged for bribery. So whose fault was it really? The rich parents? The innocent children, who had no clue that this was happening? Or the college and athletic team faculty filing the secret paperwork? Or perhaps was there a middleman operating the entire scheme? William Rick Singer was a private college counselor who founded his company called The Key back in 2011. Over the years, he gathered high-end clientele, CEOs, and celebrities, and perfected his craft by scamming young students into colleges. Getting them into colleges. He would fabricate high school sports participation and skill levels, Photoshop extracurricular activities, and even stoop so low as to falsify learning disabilities in order to cheat the standardized testing system. So this is some pretty crazy stuff. Not to say that this hasn't happened before this guy, isn't still happening, but what are your thoughts when you first heard about the scandal?
I call it rich privilege.
Mm-hmm.
It's not white privilege or any other race privilege. I call it rich privilege. And it's a situation where these parents were not used to not getting what they wanted. And the name of the guy's company, The Key, is so indicative of exactly what it was. It was a way in where they were not otherwise allowed in. So you have rich parents that are not used to being told no, and their children, I do not think, are innocent in themselves. They must have known somewhat that they're not deserving on their own credits to get into the school. And I think they took advantage of a situation where The Key had access to these coaches and stuff who are not paid anywhere near what you would think. You said it earlier, Liana, we're with USC Athletics. I understand what the faculty make at these universities. And the universities make a lot of money, but it doesn't get passed down as much to the staff and faculty as one would think. And it's a situation where these coaches and other people in the college had access to get these kids in, and they were bribed.
Mm-hmm.
Simple as that.
And I like that you said, sorry, Nima, I like that you said that it's rich privilege because you have people like Olivia Jade, who is Lori Loughlin's daughter, go on her YouTube channel. And she's got millions of followers, right? And
I have a question. Where did she cheat her way into? USC.
Okay, let's get it out of the way. Okay.
It's because they want to go to USC, not UCLA.
But let's talk about the cheating kind of scandal, right? And there was like a two-pronged system. The first is cheating on the SAT and ACT. And what Singer would do is, he had these psychs who would basically fake learning disabilities, right? So you get extra time, you get time and a half, you get double time. Sometimes he would have someone take the test for them. Yeah, a Harvard guy actually that would take the test for them, or he would administer the test. So there's this whole kind of standardized testing cheating going on. And then there was the fake applications, right? And often it was athletics. So you have the kids who I don't think were innocent. You know, they're on the road team, or, you know, they're on the soccer team. They never played soccer in their entire life.
But they're going to different facilities. They're not going to take this exam with everyone else in like a large classroom, right? They're taking this exam in a private setting, and somebody else changes the answers for them. So how do you say I didn't know, or how do you claim that you didn't know when you're given this extra privilege or extra time?
Yeah, ignorance is not a defense in the least. I would argue that they all have equal culpability, except for the college, to be honest with you. Except for maybe the colleges, you know, not having enough oversight to look into, is this person truly what they're identifying themselves as, an athlete? And I was on the USC Law Admissions Committee, all right, 20 years ago. All right, when I was waiting for my bar results, I was on USC Law Admissions Committee. And they are understaffed, and we're looking at, back then it was paper applications, where you don't have the ability to look and see, is this true what is being declared here? And there is an assumption of truth that this application is accurate, especially when you have college coaches, you know, vouching for these applicants. If you're going to have to oversee your coaches, it's kind of like, as an employer, when you're doing your employee's job, why do you have an employee there if you're doing their job for them?
Well, let me ask you this, because some of the applicants, their fake applications, had the students listed as part of, I don't know, some sports team at a high school that doesn't even have that sports team. So yes, I agree with you. But to a certain extent, you know, schools like USC, they're constantly getting thousands and like, at what point is there a red flag saying, wait a minute, we've never gotten this application before about this mysterious, you know, team at the school that shouldn't have this team, right? So do you think it's just ignorance? Do you really think that it's just, you know, an understaffed issue? Or do you think they were also paid off maybe? And we just
I don't
know.
think they were paid off.
Well, is there a culture of corruption at USC? I mean, let's just put it out there. Okay.
Not from what I experienced at all. All right.
Well, look, let's talk about a couple things. I agree with you, Sam, on one point, a very important one. F those kids. I think they should have been prosecuted as well. They were in on it. They were the one benefiting from it. So I think the U.S. Attorney's Office was pretty lenient on them, all things considered. And here's really the bottom line. And here's what happened in the case from a federal prosecutor's perspective. And obviously, it used to be at the U.S. Attorney's Office. This was out of Boston.
There it is. I was waiting for the shameless plug. I was waiting.
But here's an important point to consider. And everyone's saying, and I know we're jumping ahead, is why did these parents only get months in prison, right? A lot of people were pissed off that.
RP.
Yeah.
Rich privilege.
Well, here's actually what happened, and it was actually a federal judge that really screwed the government and screwed them bad. And here's what happened. So under the federal sentencing guidelines, the advisory sentence, which is what judges look at, is based in large part on the amount of the fraud, right, or the amount of the bribe. In this case, we're talking about $25 million in bribes. But there was a judge, one of the first judges in the case, I think her name was Judge Talwani, and she said because the schools were paid tuition, these weren't scholarship athletes, right? They're just getting preferred walk-ons. There was actually no loss to the school, and therefore the advisory guideline range, so the sentence that they're looking at, ended up being 0 to 6 months for almost all these parents. And that's why they all got a slap on the wrist. There you go. I got in the legal weeds a bit for you there.
Well, that was actually
the fact that $25 million was paid out was not a factor in the guideline.
Well, the judge said that the amount was paid to Singer, right? Who paid some of it to these coaches, but the schools themselves were like the real victims, right? And because they were actually paid tuition.
I wouldn't even say the schools are the victims. The kids that didn't get in.
The kids that were waitlisted and didn't get in, those are the real victims. Sure. The kids that actually worked really hard and couldn't afford tutors they couldn't even afford tutors, and they had to do this on their own to be waitlisted or to be rejected, only for some punk like Olivia Jade to get in. And who goes, this is what I was trying to say earlier, she went on her YouTube channel and said, I only care about the partying and the college sports. You guys know I don't care about school. So it's that attitude, and if I was one of those students who lost a spot to her, I'd be pissed. And even more so if I was a parent of that child.
How many students in total, USC, for example, do they know? Have they ever calculated the total number of fraudulent students that got in? How many kids were disadvantaged in the end?
Yeah, I know there's approximately 50 parents. So obviously, I think as Olivia and her sister. So,
Yeah, so that's at
I think you're
least
talking
two
about
at
somewhere
SC.
between 50 and 100 kids.
But that's just SC. I mean, we're talking Yale. Like, there's so many of these schools that
Harvard.
Harvard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Look, money corrupts. It's a simple position where these faculty had no oversight, and they were approached by these wealthy, students' parents. I'm talking about like the key. He had access. He was the guide between the faculty and the parents. You got parents that are like, I'll do anything to get my kid into school. And then the access was the guy at Key who said, oh, well, I have access, to get you into USC or whatever through the sports program. Let's say that your kid has, a sports ability, and that's it. He gets bribed. He bribes the faculty, and everybody is made off, as if everything's fine, when clearly you have a situation where rich privilege is allowing these kids to get into places that they should never have gotten into.
I'm going to play devil's advocate here. I don't agree with this, but a lot of people are saying this, right? Obviously, these are private schools, right? So, for instance, obviously, your firm's the official sponsor of USC Athletics, right? You got your box, you do your tailgate. There's nothing stopping Sam Manacherry, and obviously, for your kids to buy a building at USC, Manacherry Hall.
I was going to talk about that. This has been going on for 100 years where, you could buy your way in through official ways, by giving money to the school. And you'll get a name on the building. And, most probably my kids will get into USC because of nepotism. All right. But there is no difference. I agree with you. I don't think there's any difference when I think about it. If I pay $100 million and then my kid gets in, or I give $50,000 to some guy at the Key, my kid gets in, either way, you're not getting in on your merits, and that seems completely unright.
I was planning on
everybody
using
else.
NEMA to get my kids into Harvard when the time was right. Okay, now you guys are shaming me.
But even at Harvard, they were like senators' kids there. Listen, I didn't get their LSAT scores, but I'm sure they're
this has been going on the beginning of time. Yeah, it's called a legacy. All right, a legacy means that your parent or somebody in your family went there before you, and you have a better chance of getting into that school if you're a legacy. Is that right? I don't know.
But there are,
By the way, public schools don't allow for that. So
I know Southwestern takes.
That's a private school. Public schools in California, like the UCs, they cannot consider donations. They can't consider alumni. Like UCLA,
yeah, but
it's
you
like
think
strictly,
they don't? I know they can't.
I'm just telling you, what I'm obviously not on the admissions committee there, but you cannot consider those. But I know I've been to both. Private schools do. Absolutely. They'll ask, hey, do any of your family members go here?
Oh, absolutely. I get hell of a lot more things from USC as an alumni than I do from UCLA, and I get stuff from UCLA asking for money here and there. But USC, comes after me much more, requesting donations. But at the same time, USC gave me a lot more pride than UCLA. UCLA, it was like an extension of high school for me. But when I went to USC, it was a very different environment. It was very different interaction with the school, mentorship. So that's why I'm much more of a USC Trojan than I'm a UCLA Bruin, even though I'm an undergrad at UCLA, where you would think that's my alma mater.
Let me ask you guys a different question. So let me ask you, Nima.
Sure.
You went to Harvard, right? You take great pride in not letting us forget that every day of our lives. But, it's something to be very proud of, all jokes aside,
Absolutely.
right? So when you hear something like this, right, and kids are getting into Yale and Harvard and all these fantastic schools because their parents are rich enough to bribe, the admissions committee, how does that make you feel? Like, does that make you feel like your degrees may be worth less, when people are just kind of paying their way into a school, right? Because you've worked hard, you've done your thing. You went at 19.
I
that's
would say
impressive.
it's worth even more to answer.
Listen,
Does it?
What I would say is, listen, this is just something I was used to. I think cheating on the SAT, ACT, that's beyond the pale, man. You don't cheat on the test. But look, if your parents are well connected and they're going to pay, that's just the reality of life. You're going to get in. It can be a club. You're going to get the best table, right? If it's a house, you're going to get the best house. And you're going to get your kid into the best school. Dude, when I was there, I think Soros's kid was there, one of Bin Laden's brothers, and obviously his family's very wealthy. There was some super rich, loaded people there, So
And were they smart though?
Again, I don't know because I wasn't, again, looking at their grades, right? Law school, maybe you kind of know who's smart and who's not, but
I feel like in Harvard, those are the kinds of kids that really go to these schools.
Yeah, but
right?
look, getting into the school, look, the daughter of the Full House, That's different. She even admitted that I don't care about school. But Bin Laden, Soros, just because you get in doesn't mean you're going to do well. Like, what's the point of going there unless you're trying to get an education and get a degree? Like, why are they at Harvard Law School? Just for their resume? Or are they trying to become lawyers where that money is worth something for their future that they're paying all this bribe?
I don't know if they are, because these students come from such wealthy families that it's like you're going to be okay regardless. Do you really need to go to Harvard and become a lawyer or a judge or
I think
whatever?
it's all prestige.
I mean, it's just to say that, hey, like Lori
just like
Loughlin,
Nima, I went to Harvard Law School.
I went to Harvard.
Well, and again, I just want to talk about the other side. The other thing is, okay, so obviously this has been happening. It's above board. You're paying your kids. The other question is like, look, the government spent a lot of time prosecuting these people. They chased after them for years. They got slaps on the wrist for the reasons that we talked about. Again, I think the max was like about 7 months in jail. Was it worth making a federal case about this? Spending federal government resources, having the FBI kind of flip these people and cooperating when there's all sorts of other crimes that, like, I mean,
it's definitely anticlimactic. That's for sure. You go through all that publicity, all that time, all that money, all that effort, and in the end, put a slap on the wrist.
Yeah,
why did you even publicize
Huffman
it?
was in jail for like 2 weeks.
Why did everybody get spun through all this and then in the end nothing be done? Is it because one judge decided to use the guidelines favorably against the victim? I mean, against the culprits? I definitely don't think it was worth the time and effort and money of the federal government to go after all this research and investigation and do nothing about it in the end.
Yeah, I don't think I ever recall a case, and I prosecuted more than 1,000, where someone got 2 weeks in prison. I mean, that's a joke under...
Well, also, I mean, what, you guys think it's stopped? I don't think so. I mean...
This racket might have stopped, but another one opens
exactly.
up.
You think that there aren't other schemes that are currently going on or that were happening simultaneously? I'm sure there are. So, to me, it's a waste because nothing really changed. I haven't seen anything fundamentally change or any of these schools really come out and say, look, this is what we're going to do to rectify what's been happening to students.
Nothing really did. I mean, there was some spin-off litigation. It was interesting. And you guys talked about it. One was these class action lawsuits, and people said, listen, my degree is now devalued because, you let all of these people that aren't qualified in. So now when I'm applying, people think my UCLA, USC, whatever degree is worth less. That didn't go anywhere.
You can't quantify it.
And then there were lawsuits from people that didn't get in, but
you can't prove that you didn't get in anyways. Yeah, exactly. It's all about proving it, yeah.
So, ultimately, look, it was a huge scandal, and we were all talking about it, and it could be everything from, Fox and CNN, Us Weekly. I mean, this is something, it was, kind of like a Johnny Depp. It hit everything, because you got the celebrity side, you got the feds prosecuting it, you got this litigation against these schools, but...
It all died in a whimper.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this, Nima, because you're so big on, just social media, and you do so much, in terms of, commenting on celebrity issues. Do you think it would have been this big if celebrities weren't involved? If it was just CEOs and the rich and famous? No, right? If we didn't have Felicity Huffman and Lori
it
Loughlin.
probably wouldn't have been prosecuted. I can tell you that
Really?
right now. Some federal prosecutor, some at the FBI is like, listen, I'm going to make a name for myself. I'm going to send a message. Just like when they do tax prosecutions, right? You always kind of want to get the big name, the Wesley Snipes or someone that isn't. Because, look, you need to send a message, not just for a deterrent effect, but you want to make a name for yourself. These are lawyers. These are agents. They're trying to get up in the world, So ultimately, I think that's what it was about. It was about sending a message, making a name, and really getting those high-profile defendants.
Do you think that the defendant's legal counsel was a big factor in such small sentencing? Because these people got the best defense lawyers they can buy.
It was like Latham, these amazing big firms, because they're loaded, They're going to get the best of the best, many of whom were former federal prosecutors themselves. So,
well, look at Felicity Huffman, right? She I think her bribe was like $15,000 to take for somebody else to take her kids outside or something like that, or SAT. And so do you think that 2 week stint was worth...
Well, Felicity Huffman's case was interesting. She was the first defendant to plead guilty, so the judge gave her the benefit of the doubt. Everyone else kind of dragged their feet, including obviously Massimo, Laughlin, So the ones that dragged it out more got hit a little bit harder.
Yeah, but what, 2 months?
Yeah, I mean...
What was the crime that was committed?
Bribery.
Bribery. She paid
Bribery of
someone...
a public official? No.
No, it was basically
mail fraud.
Mail fraud, wire fraud. That was the federal jurisdictional hook.
Gotcha.
Yeah, because but also she was the one celebrity who spent the least amount of like money on this thing, right? Because
she got the cheapest deal.
Interesting that what she did, because I think her husband is also an actor, right? For his name. She pled to exonerate him. So
Sam, thank you so much for joining. This was
pleasure,
so
guys.
much fun. We'd love to have you again, but I think it's your time to go.
All right.
That's not
Bye,
from me. It's
everybody.
coming from all these guys.
It's a pleasure.
over here.
See you around.
But thank you for joining us, and
Thanks, Sam.
I hope
It's a
to
pleasure, brother.
see you again.
Thanks, guys.
And we're back with LA Legal. Nima, I'm going to let you do the intro.
we're joined with another of my good friends, Sam Tabibian, also of Life Law, Sam Manucheri's partner, cousin too, I believe. Thanks for joining us. We're talking about the college admissions scandal.
Thank you for having me.
Boy, am I glad to have my own chair today.
It's cozy here.
You guys are comfortable?
Very.
Okay, let's do this. So you were behind the scenes. You listened to our conversation. Tell us a little bit about what your thoughts are. Maybe you disagree with some of the things we said. So let's hear it.
So a couple things that I saw that got a little perspective on. So when you were discussing, are the kids in on it or not? And believe it or not, a lot of the kids were not in on it. So I had the opportunity before this podcast to talk to somebody in high school at the time when the whole scandal was happening, in a private school here in Los Angeles. And I was told that there was one student that came in that took one of the tests and was kind of, telling everyone, hey, look, I did such a great job on this test. I'm getting into college and everything. But they found out after the fact that he was part of the college admission scandal and that he had the fake test happen. And he himself didn't realize it because he thought he took a genuine test, and that was basically it. So it was clear that he didn't know, and there's a lot of other students similar to that because their parents purposely, intentionally hid it from the kids so they don't realize that it's happening.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, during sentencing, we did hear some of the parents really fall on the sword and say, listen, my son, my daughter took the test legitimately. We changed the answers after the fact. So I believe it.
I believe it too, but playing devil's advocate, wouldn't you say that for your kid if you're in trouble and you're probably going to jail? Wouldn't you want to save them? I would. I'd be like, but she knows nothing. But
I actually think a lot of them will do this because they're afraid the kids will spill the beans. They hide it from their kids so that the kids won't turn around and say something in the future that'll really get them in jeopardy.
Yeah, and all these kids ended up really withdrawing from school, right? Because the schools, they initiated disciplinary actions. They're going to kick them out, right? They don't want to be embarrassed ultimately. I mean, it was such a black eye for these institutions. And these are like the best of the best, right? These people aren't cheating to get into community college, respectfully, you know, or even, whatever you want to call it. These are like top 25 internationally known universities, very difficult to get into. So
I guess what I think is interesting is, if I am not someone who's very studious and, I'm taking these practice exams and not doing nearly as well, right? And all of a sudden I get into Yale. Wouldn't I be like, what just happened? I mean, I don't know. Maybe you wouldn't ask those questions, but I feel like I'd be like, oh, okay.
Well,
it's weird, right?
If you all of a sudden take the SAT and you get a perfect score or something close to it, you think to yourself, oh, wow, maybe I am really smart. I should go to Harvard or Yale or something like that. Yeah. So I think they're just ignorant and they're young.
I mean, I agree with you. I don't think all of them knew. Most of them knew. Is it possible that some did? I think so. And I think
Olivia Jade, right? She's taking pictures of herself on a rowing machine, right? She's a rower. She's in crew. She never rowed in her entire life, So won't you ask your mom, hey, Mom, like,
what
Dad,
am I rowing for?
What do you need this picture for,
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I didn't even know there was such a thing as, like, rowing teams. Did you guys? I mean,
those are the teams you want to apply for, right? They're not going to get on, like, the women's basketball team or the football team. Those are very you want those kind of, like, niche, smaller, like, sports. And again, with all due respect to people that row, I don't think it's as competitive to someone that's playing basketball or football or soccer or kind of more traditional sport. Well, that's why Singer was smart and went the rowing route.
Yeah, you went for the sports that have the lowest demand, and that's how you got them in. And he was brilliant in that, but, corrupt.
Yeah, the entire scheme is brilliant. But also, when you talk about the students that dropped out, like, for example, Olivia Jade and her sister, I think it's also, their family has a big PR team, right? And I think they were advised, like, yo, get out, you know?
Let's talk about that PR team.
Yeah.
Because did they do the right thing? She maintained her innocence, and I'm talking about Lori Loughlin, until the bitter end. She was being skewered on traditional and social media. Everyone's like, are you kidding? There's text messages, there's emails, like, you're saying we did it, we scammed the system. I mean, there's like smoking gun evidence. Was that the right way to handle it? I don't think so.
What do you think?
I think she should have fell on her sword right at the outset. Everyone that got nailed, once the evidence is there, you're dealing with federal prosecutors. What are you thinking? When the FBI is wiretapping you on this evidence, you just got to own up and hopefully you get the minimum sentence, with a lot of them did.
But I think that goes back to what Sam was saying about rich privilege, right? Because you think I'm just going to say I didn't do it. And maybe the thought was like, okay, maybe this thing will just go away at some point, right? I don't know if someone like her really understood the gravity of the situation. And you were following this very closely. You were constantly commenting on it. And so from what I remember is that you were constantly like, she is still maintaining her innocence, and I thought that was insane.
Oh, it was absolutely insane. Obviously, any type of media thing, I'm all about it. But that was kind of like the perfect storm. And I'm like, is this woman crazy, or is she just a narcissist, or is she getting bad legal advice, or a publicist? What are you saying? You will, not only are you going to get convicted at trial, let's not forget, trials are public. It would have been a media spectacle. Imagine that courthouse there in Boston, with Lori Loughlin walking in as a criminal defendant, She was going to be found guilty in a matter of minutes, if not hours. So look, it was just a matter of time. But why don't you plead? Put this behind you. And But again, I think it's hard for someone that is obviously not a career criminal, never been involved in the criminal justice system, probably the first time ever being arrested or having cuffs placed on her. I think it's hard for those types of people, white collar criminal defendants, as we call them, to really kind of own up and accept responsibility when it's your first time in the system.
Do you think her sentence would have been significantly less had she not dragged her feet?
I think so, but we're talking about a difference of months, So it's not like she was looking at years in prison for the reason that we discussed. So, but I think she would have shaved off a couple months off her sentence, And again, I think she would have been less of a laughingstock. Even her husband, Massimo, he was kind of less in the media, less statements. Obviously, he's a big name. We all used to wear the shirts. Probably not you, but us, we're a little bit older when we grew up, at least in elementary school.
Yeah.
He was a big enough name, but I think the public will remember him a little bit differently than Lori Loughlin.
Yeah. So their older daughter actually was a student at SC for a year or two before this whole thing happened. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think she also dropped out. And so do you think that she got in on her merits? Or do you think there was a scheme with the older one too?
Probably not. It's criminals just do criminal things continuously. So very likely she didn't get on her own merits. Obviously, Jay didn't get on her own merits. But the one thing I did want to comment is how you and Sam were saying that that there's no effect of them doing the federal prosecution, that nothing's come out of it, and I disagree. First of all, I think most of the colleges are not going to have oversight to make sure it's not going to happen again. So I don't know if it's going to be a long-term thing, but at least for the short term. But more importantly, one thing that I've found out is a lot of the private school kids that were involved in the schools that actually had people that were in the scandal, there's now backlash. They're not getting into these institutions anymore. So a lot of the private school kids that are very qualified and are rich did not get into the Harvards, the USCs, the Yales, or anything, even though they actually had the right merits for it. So I do think there's a kind of a balancing out now. The equilibrium's changed, where the private school kids are no longer have a leg up on everybody else. And I think that's going to probably stay around for a little bit.
And that kind of goes to what I said about the real victims, right? This was not a victimless crime. These are the kids who are now, still having to deal with this whole scandal. And so, it's really sad to think that, right? Because these kids also they're working hard. Their parents are paying for them to get a private school education, and to think that because some super rich and famous people did something wrong, now these kids still have to suffer.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. I think Sam raised a good point. Obviously, you got these private high schools, right? And what were they doing? They're seeing that their kids who clearly aren't qualified, right? Obviously, these are small schools. They have college placement directors. They know a very mediocre student is getting into a very good school, So do they think that this is just luck? Or what were they? And what about the universities? We've seen it where what kind of oversight is there? And I know Sam was on the admission. Who's on the admissions committee, right? They're not doing any due diligence here.
Well, that's what I was saying, right? Some of these schools don't even have these teams. You would think that if you're doing something, if your job is to oversee admissions, right, for years, at some point you can be like...
But I have a question for you, Liana. During the break, we were talking about a candidate and doing a reference check. Look, I'm not a huge university, But when someone applies, you call their references.
Yeah.
Don't you bother and call the coach or, the school and verify this information? Is this person really an athlete?
Honestly, we're talking about the number one universities in the nation that are part of this scandal. They have the resources. They have a big endowment, so they should be able to do this. Moreover, they have access to technology. They can have software programs, AI, do the background checks for them. So I do think that they should have a lot more oversight than they do. On the flip side, I also have to kind of, think that it is difficult for them. It's not like they're getting 1,000 applications over a year period. No, they're getting inundated in one short period with thousands of applications. And some of these schools only have an acceptance rate of 3 or 4%.
But Sam, this isn't the 97% or the 90. These are the 4% that are getting in. It's not like I'm getting a resume and I'm throwing it in the trash. This is someone I'm going to hire. Shouldn't I do some more due diligence? And let me tell you, there's many shameful things about what happened here. But one of the most shameful, in my opinion, is that this case broke because of an informant in another case, a securities fraud case, that said, listen, I'm going to cooperate. I'm going to be a rat. I'm going to be snitched. And I'm going to tell you about my current case. I know about this fraudulent scheme that these rich parents are doing. It's not like the universities came and said, hey, this applicant is clearly submitting a fraudulent application. Maybe we should dig a little deeper. All these universities failed.
Well, let me give you an example to piggyback off your applicant example. If I get a resume from someone that's worked at LifeLaw and they list like, I don't know, intake for criminal department, I'm like, they don't do crim. What are you talking about? That's going to be like, wait, let me go check, right? And so I feel like if I'm getting an application from, I don't know, Burbank High, and because I went there and I know they don't have a rowing team, right? Wouldn't I be like, let me look into that, right?
I mean, look, I deal with applications all day. I get resumes all day. I honestly don't have the time to sit there and vet every single resume. For the most part, you think people are going to be honest. You're not going to assume everyone that's going to submit some documentation is lying to you.
Less jaded than we are.
Well, I mean, look, you can't have that mindset. Even the universities don't have that mindset. They're not thinking that everyone that's applying to this school is lying. They actually think that everyone that's applying to this schools are being honest and forthcoming. But you're taking a few bad apples, and it's ruining for everyone. And that's the problem that we have here at hand. So do they have to turn around and change all their resources and put all this money to vet, to the highest degree every single applicant? I don't know what the answer to that is, but it's kind of a balancing act. And for the most part, I think if the people are prosecuted at the minimum, this will deter them from doing it in the future.
But then what's the takeaway, right? Obviously this happened. Case is closed. The universities aren't doing their job and vetting at least the people they accept. Forget the rejections. At least the people you accept. What reason is for someone to not fudge their application a little bit? These are the most competitive schools in the country. And if you can lie and get in because the admissions directors and their staff are asleep at the wheel, what is going to stop?
And that's the reason why they should take an extra step to vet, because these are the most competitive schools, right? And so in the effort to make it fair for students who actually work really hard, there's students who are like driven, like I'm going to USC, I'm going to Harvard, whatever school it is, and they work their butts off from like middle school even, right? And so these schools should take, the universities, that extra step, like you said, and maybe go back through the admissions or the applications that they've admitted and go back and double check.
But it's not the university admissions that has to vet it. They're taking their coach's word for it. They're taking their own other employees' words for it. And you don't expect somebody that works on the university staff to be defrauding the university itself. So most of the coaches, for example, at USC, they were defrauding USC because they wanted to put more money in their pocket. And the admissions people wouldn't expect someone to defraud them. And, being sponsors of USC Athletics, we've had a lot of time and effort, the ability to have a lot of time with the administration there. And I can tell you the people at the USC Athletics have been the most unbelievable people I've worked with in a long time. They've been such stand-up, great people. So I can easily see the bad apples ruining it, but they're such great people there.
I know, but look, hasn't USC had one scandal after another in their athletic department? I'm just saying, I'm just pushing back respectfully, in their football department, in their basketball department, literally like bribing players. So you have a university that's trusting their coaches to do the right thing when they're literally paying off players. And this is proven in NCAA, infraction cases, in civil litigation. And I say this, look, I went to UCLA, Harvard. It doesn't matter. USC should not be trusting their coaches when it comes to these critically important matters, because collectively as a whole, even if there's one or two bad apples, they're ruining it for everyone else.
I agree, but every college has this issue. Even UCLA had this issue before.
Sure.
When we were back, early 2000s, they had a big scandal as well.
They had cheating scandals.
So, I mean, how can you vet out the coach that's going to be the fraudulent person that's going to take advantage or not? There's only so much you can do. And you as an employer here, you have staff over here. I'm sure there's been staff here that's in the past done things that are unscrupulous or try to defraud somehow, and you have to catch it. But you can't prevent that. You can only catch it after the fact.
Of course. No, it's more, I think, of a you love and learn type system. Now that we know that this has happened, I think going forward, the onus is on the universities to do better and to do more. And hopefully that's the takeaway here, that, we're not in a sort of just blind faith system where folks aren't checking these applications, especially the folks that get in. I think that's really what has to happen.
I agree. Going strictly based off the honor code is not something that I think is
I think it's
right.
just going to add a huge layer, just like going to airports now,
Yeah.
Before 9/11, you didn't have TSA. There was a little bit of trust on people coming on airplanes, and now it's zero trust.
Yeah, and it sucks for the rest of us.
It does suck for the rest of us.
I just come back from Mexico. Trust me, it was hell.
So that's going to be the same thing for college admissions. When my kids want to go to college, there's going to be a whole new level of vetting just for them to try and apply to schools now.
So Nima, final question for you as our resident former federal prosecutor. Let's talk a little bit about Singer. Has he pled guilty, and what are your thoughts about his cooperation so far?
Yeah, he not only pled guilty, he's been cooperating. He's a rat. He was the one that was making recorded phone calls, sending text messages, gathering evidence against the parents. So obviously the feds got to him, and through him, they were able to kind of get all the parents who were involved. So it's going to be interesting to see what kind of sentence he gets, because he was really the ringleader, but also the one who cooperated the most.
So do you think his cooperation comes from some kind of plea bargain that he has?
Yeah, so the government gave him a proffer agreement. So the agreement basically says, we're going to give you an opportunity, but there's no promises made. And then at sentencing, you're going to talk about your cooperation. We, the government, are going to talk about your cooperation. And it's based on a point system. So the judge will reduce his sentence based on the amount of points that the judge believes the cooperation is worth.
Awesome.
What do you think he's going to get?
I think he's going to get years in prison because of his role. He was doing this for such a long time.
As he should. Okay, any final thoughts?
I can't think of any.
No? Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining. As I mentioned earlier, this was actually really, really fun. So we're going to work on getting you guys here maybe more often, different topics. But thank you for joining. Nima, as always, it's been a pleasure. And for all of you, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.